Um, Gen Zs, are you religious? I'm sure you love to be religious if, you know, it put food on the table, but no one got time to go to church every Sunday.
If you only read the headlines, you'd think that the US is in the middle of a religious revival led by Gen Z. USA Today: Gen Z is returning to Christianity. Axios: young men are leading a religious resurgence. And here's a very confident claim from the evangelical ministry, the Gospel Coalition. It's here. Gen Z revival hits campuses. But if you read sociological data instead of the headlines, the picture looks very different. A real revival would leave a clear statistical footprint, and it's just not there. To see this, let's zoom out and look at one of the most respected studies, the Pew Research Center's 2023-2024 Religious Landscape Study. This is a massive study of nearly 37,000 Americans, designed to track their religious identity, beliefs, and practices over time. And here's the top line finding. Back in 2007, about 78% of American adults identified as Christian. By 2024, that number sat at roughly 63%.
Yeah, there are less Christians. People are starting to realize that religion doesn't really put food on the table. It's getting harder to put food on the table, and I don't have the luxury to go to church on Sunday. So I gotta work. Sorry, Jesus. Forgive me.
So the Christian population of the US is dramatically smaller than it used to be. But notice here that this long downward slide is not continuing at the same pace. Over the last 5 years or so, the graph has stabilized, hovering in roughly the 60 to 64% range. And we can see this also in measures of prayer and church attendance. The share of adults who say they pray daily, for example, has fallen dramatically since 2007, but since 2021, it has stabilized in the mid-40s. Monthly attendance to a religious service tells the same story, leveling off in the low 30s since around 2020.
The attending religious services monthly has hovered in the low 30s. In the new RLS, 33% say they go to religious service at least once a month. Yeah, that ain't much. I went to the St. Latter-day's Church for a while. Honestly, I have not been converted because, well, I mean, it's a me issue, right? It's not their fault. But one of the biggest struggles about going to church is that I don't have time to go to church. I literally don't have time. Like, I have to work weekdays and weekends. And what happens if I don't work? Well, I won't have a roof over my head. I won't have food on my table. I won't have clothes on my back. I won't have a bed to sleep on. I will be shitting on the street. And these church people, the nuns, they want me to go to church on Sunday, which takes about like 3 hours of my Sunday, right? Also, I had to commute there as well, which will take another hour. 2 hours for round trip. So that's like 5 hours of my Sunday gone. And then they also want to meet up with me to like have some kind of, I forgot, well, what the hell is it called? But they want to meet up with me to talk to me to try to convert me even further, which will take another hour and a half on top of the round trip, 2 hours. So it'll be 3 hours and a half. So 3 hours and a half plus 5 hours, that's 8 hours and a half of my week gone trying to go to church. I don't have time to go to church, but you know, it's the economy is rough. I have to make a living. Like I'm not going to spend 8.5 hours of my week when I could spend it on making more money.
And we also see a slowing in the rise of religious.
And there are more people more poor than I am, and I think they should prioritize their own survival over going to church.
The unaffiliated people, the so-called nuns. That is NONES. The folks who check the none box on the survey question, what religion are you? They make up around 29% of US adults in the latest surveys, and they've been bouncing around that same range over the last few years. In other words, we're not seeing a third great awakening, we're seeing more of a religious plateau, an unmistakable long-term decline in Christian identification and a short-term stabilization. But here's the piece that matters most to the whole narrative of a Gen Z revival. Even though the overall decline has slowed, younger adults remain much less likely to be Christian than older adults. In that same survey, only around 46% of 18 to 24-year-olds identify as Christian. Only 27% of them pray daily, and 25% attend a religious service monthly. This is a huge generational gap when we compare.
Oh yeah, look, see the difference, right? It's poor people, people with more money. I'm pretty sure it's a money issue. I'm willing to bet it's a money issue because these are people that don't have to work. They're living on pensions and retirement, and these are people that are spending. The young adults are spending 70% of their paycheck on rent.
Compared to older adults. The sociologist Ryan Burge, an author of The Vanishing Church, backed this up when he dug into multiple data sets. Using data from the General Social Survey, Burge notes that the percentage of people who say they believe in God without a doubt drops with each generation. Boomers are highest at 57%, and that drops down to 40% with Gen Z. And he notes the biggest drop is the most recent shift from millennials to Gen Z, a drop of 8 points of people who confidently believe in God. And when Burge looked at attendance, Gen Z comes out as the least church-attending generation in American history.
Don't blame them.
Only
they got to make a fucking living.
Attending weekly. Though the number that really jumps out is the 38% of Gen Z who never attends, way higher than any generation before them. As for religious identification, we see something similar with the Pew study. After decades of steady growth, the share of American adults who say they have no religious affiliation has mostly flattened out. So, taken together, is there a Gen Z revival? Well, Gen Z has the lowest levels of confident belief in God, and the highest rates of never going to church of any generation measured. Yes, the explosive growth of religious disaffiliation has slowed, but nothing here looks like a dramatic return to organized religion. Attendance hasn't bounced back, and belief hasn't surged. So, if the major datasets all show the same thing, low belief, low attendance, and historically high levels of non-religion among Gen Z, why do we keep seeing headlines about a Gen Z revival?
Well, yep. I'm going to try to guess on this one. It's a psyop. They're putting up these articles, these fake articles to say, hey, look, hey, your people are going back to church. You should go to church too. Eh?
A big part of the answer is that some of these claims are built on flawed data or on media outlets misreading what the data actually says.
Yep.
For example, consider a recent study from the UK making similar claims. A report from an organization called the Bible Society argued that church attendance in England and Wales had exploded since 2018. According to their numbers, attendance among men aged 18 to 24 supposedly jumped from 4% to 21% in just a few years. But the sociologist David Voas, one of the leading experts on religious change, took a closer look at the data and said, not so fast. The most trusted national survey, the British Social Attitude Study, shows the exact opposite trend. Church-going declined between 2018 and 2023, and individual denominations reported the same. While the Bible Society claimed that Catholic Church attendance had doubled, data from the Catholic Church itself actually showed a sizable drop during the same period. So where did the whole revival story come from? Voas argues it was the study's methodology. The Bible Society used an online opt-in panel run by YouGov. People volunteer to join these panels, which means the sample is not truly random. And that matters a lot, especially with young adults. They're a notoriously hard group to survey accurately, and the ones who do participate in these online panels tend to look very different from their peers. They're the young adults who are more settled, easier to reach, and more likely to already be involved in church life than the average young adult. This can create the illusion of a massive surge, but you're actually just seeing a skewed sample. Dr. Voas's bottom line is the old cliche that extraordinary claims require extraordinary data, and the evidence here is just not strong enough. When you compare these revival headlines to the durable long-term surveys, the probability-based ones that actually track national trends, nothing suggests a dramatic return to organized religion in the UK. In other cases, the Gen Z revival narrative comes from misunderstanding the underlying data. Take, for example, this Fox News article from October 2025. Gen Z men returning to church in surprising numbers in faith resurgence. It summarizes the findings of a study conducted by the Barna Group, saying
this guy will not get to the point. What the heck?
church attendance has increased among Gen Z and millennial men, showing signs of a return to church that surpasses older generations. But that's not what the underlying study
Can you get to the
shows, not even close. Dr. Burge pointed out the key detail that apparently everyone at Fox missed. The Barna study doesn't measure Gen Z as a whole. It only was looking at Gen Z who are already churchgoers. Not all of young adults, not
so they're
the general population, just the ones who already attend church. So the study's actual finding is much more narrow. Among the subset of Gen Z,
so they just they're getting data from people that are already attendees. Among the subset of Gen Z who already go to church, they attend slightly more often than the subset of millennials who already go to church. Oh, so basically they just ask churchgoers, hey, do you go to church? And obviously, duh, I'm here. Huh? What are you talking? Well, what kind of question is that? Oh, okay, no, I'm just doing a survey. So,
who already go to church, they attend slightly more often than the subset of millennials who already go to church. And the difference is not dramatic. Church-going Gen Z attend about 1.9 times per month, and church-going millennials attend about 1.8 times per month. But that tiny effect gets translated into the headline, Gen Z men returning to church in growing numbers. And I'm not saying that a millennial or Gen Z revival is impossible, but reversing the current trend would demand a shift on a scale that we've simply never seen in all of American history. And it's truly staggering when you put it into numbers. Dr. Burge points out that to bring millennials back to the level of religious affiliation as their parents, you would need around 10 million millennials to reaffiliate. And Gen Z, which starts from an even lower baseline, you would require around 18 million to reaffiliate. He writes, there's no sign of that happening in any dataset. The reality is that there hasn't been a single event in the past 50 years that sparked a sustained, measurable rise in religious attendance in the United States.
Oh yeah, dude, everyone is fucking poor. I know a lot of Gen Zs that are working with me, and dude, they work. Gen Zs are hard workers. They are absolute hard workers. I know a Gen Z that works full-time at a job, part-time at another job, and goes to school. Dude, back in my day, I just go to school and work at a part-time job. And I know another Gen Z that's works 2 full-time jobs, had to drop out of school because she couldn't afford to go to school. It's expensive going to school. Just no one's gonna pay for your shit. If no one's paying for your shit, they have to work. And I also know another one that has a side hustle, as they call it, on top of their full-time job. Life is rough for you guys because, boomers, they own 75% of the money in the world, or in the United States. So there ain't much for you guys to take.
So the real question is, does this plateau, which we do see in the data, does this signal the start of a religious rebound, or is it simply a pause in a longer-term decline? I think it's simply a pause based on what we know about non-religion and generational change. When people imagine a revival, they picture, dramatic moments,
Honestly, I think churchgoers are people with personal life problems. Just, it's usually not so much money problem, but it's people that just have nothing going on in their life, and then a lot of their problems could be solved if they take action. I went to church many times, and then I found out that people that go to church primarily are Mormons, people from Utah or Alaska. But people go to church also to make friends. They're struggling with loneliness. And that is something that money couldn't solve. If you're struggling with loneliness, the best thing to do is to talk to other people, be the initiator of conversation. Just call up your friends, ask them to hang out, catch up with them, and or make plans for your family. it's people like that, but they don't do that, so they're struggling with loneliness, and they rather have someone else do the planning, do the initiation for them. So they go to church, and when you go to church, you'll see a lot of very nice Mormons that will talk to you. They will initiate conversations with you, and people like that. That's why a lot of people go to church. And when no when all these people are talking to you, you start to get that serotonin fix, and they feel some kind of, what's it called, enlightenment.
Conversions, people suddenly flooding back into churches.
So when you're a poor Gen Z, you cannot afford it.
Spiritual awakening. But religion in the real world usually shifts through generations. Parents passing on their religion to their kids. And a growing body of sociological research shows that non-religion tends to be remarkably stable across generations. A recent study of school kids in England, fittingly titled "The Stickiness of Non-Religion," helps to illustrate this. The sociologist found that when parents are already non-religious, their kids typically adopt the same stance through simple absence of religion in daily life. At home, religion is not talked about. There are no rituals, no social or behavioral expectations rooted in a particular religious culture.
I mean,
in
yeah,
that
that's
environment, not being religious becomes the default. And one of the striking takeaways from this broader line of research is just how strongly this non-religious default carries on forward. One landmark finding from the early 2000s is that if you're raised by two Christian parents in Britain, you have maybe a 50-50 chance of remaining Christian as an adult. But if you're raised with no religion, the odds that you'll stay non-religious are overwhelmingly high, well over 90% in some studies. Of course, we're talking about the UK and not the US, and the US is shown to be remarkably resistant when it comes to secularization compared to Europe. But these studies are why, for me, the idea of a Gen Z revival is so hard to square with the data. If younger generations of Americans are already starting at lower levels of belief and practice, and if non-religion itself is this sticky across generations, then a dramatic return to organized religion becomes even harder to imagine as Gen Z starts to have kids. So when you hear claims about a Gen Z revival, everything we're seeing across belief, behavior, belonging...
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't see the incentive. Well, actually, I do see the incentive to being religious. I've known a few drug addicts and alcoholics that turned to religion, and they managed to curb or stop their addiction completely. Like that, I don't think religion is absolutely like nonsense. I do think that it does serve a purpose for some people. Some of them do see hope, right? There's that one Asian gangster that he went to church once, and it changed his entire life. He dropped out of that gang life, and then he just devoted his life to God. And he also fixed his relationship with his father.
And childhood transmission points to not a resurgence, but a plateau. And possibly beneath that plateau, the stickiness of non-religion that tends to flow in one direction generation after generation. So despite the headlines, the data leads us somewhere much less dramatic, and a lot of that comes down to how we understand the information we're swimming in. And one of the best creators exploring that broader media landscape is Lindsay Ellis. If you look at her YouTube channel, you might think that she's posted, one video in the last year? But that's because most of her stuff is now exclusive to Nebula. Her newest video essay is The Macabre World of Body Cam YouTube, a deep dive into this unsettling little corner of YouTube that packages police body cam footage into entertainment. And because it's Lindsay Ellis, it's smart, it's dark, and it's doing the thing that she does best, pulling apart an entire genre and showing you why it matters. And you can watch that in all of her other video essays on Nebula. Nebula is a creator-owned streaming platform.
All right, okay. Yeah, I mean, religion is dying because it doesn't really serve much purpose. It does help some people with like their own personal life problem, and I think that some Christian values are good for society, like like don't rape, don't kill, don't steal, obviously. And I think like the fear of God does help with. Oh shit. The fear of God does help with, curbing people's desire to commit sins. I don't think it's a completely bad thing, but I think Gen Zs are more mature than millennials are. There's just no doubt about it. Like they don't drink as much, they don't cause as much crime. Yeah, you know, you go on Twitch or sorry, you go on Kick, and then you see some of these nuisance streamers like Johnny Somali. I don't know how. I think he's a Gen Z. But you see like all these annoying bratty people like Jack Doherty. Those are a super minority of the Gen Z group. A lot of Gen Zs are very mature.